Have you ever felt your heart restless, as if the worries of the world were weighing down on you? It's at this point that the journey of fully trusting in God begins, with the certainty that He is present even when everything seems chaotic. Throughout these 24 chapters, we will explore practical steps and biblical teachings to renew your mind, strengthen your faith, and find an inner peace that does not rely on external circumstances. But stay tuned until the end, because you will discover a transformative principle that can radically change how you deal with fears and anxieties. It's something simple yet profound, offering immediate relief to the heart and opening doors to a life of genuine serenity. If you want to dive deeper into these teachings and walk alongside us in this quest for true peace, be sure to subscribe to the channel. This way, you won't miss any of the upcoming content, and you will stay firmly on the path toward a lighter and more trusting life in God. You are here, faced with a new opportunity to move towards something deeper and more genuine. Perhaps you carry certain expectations, maybe you feel a mix of anxiety and hope, but the truth is, you've decided to open yourself up to a journey in meeting God. It may seem simple to say that this is the beginning, but each initial step holds great meaning. When you first heard about Joshua 1:9 and came across that powerful phrase saying, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous," something within you recognized that trusting is not just an option, but a call. Life often presents challenges, and many times you try to predict every outcome before taking a risk. However, right now, all that matters is the decision to move forward, even without immediate answers. You might remember a moment when you needed to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and simply say, "Yes, I will try." That's what faith is all about. When you choose to be guided by trust, instead of clinging to old anxieties, something shifts. You realize that there is more than just obstacles. There is the possibility of a safe and blessed journey, even if external circumstances don't always seem favorable. You embrace the truth that each step can be held in divine hands. If you still question what this trust really means, remember that it's not about ignoring fears or pretending everything is perfect. It's about facing discomfort courageously, believing that God is present. Joshua had to deal with his own fears while leading an entire people. He could have been paralyzed, but the message given to him was clear: to be strong and courageous. You don't need to be a hero to live this. You just need to start. Sit down, breathe, observe your emotions, and accept that this state of soul doesn't happen overnight. You allow yourself to grow gradually, recognizing that each step is part of building solid trust. Have you noticed that sometimes fear arises precisely from the attempt to control what hasn't happened yet? When you release that need for control and put your faith into practice, something new awakens within you. It's as if the certainty blossoms that you are not alone. For a long time, you may have lived chasing immediate results. It's natural to seek quick solutions. After all, no one likes to stay in uncertainty. However, if there's one thing that the beginning of any faith journey teaches, it's that answers don't always come as quickly as you wish. There's a silent process that takes place within you. In this process, patience is honed, sensitivity to perceive subtle signs is developed, and above all, the humility to understand that there's a higher care beyond any of your actions is strengthened. You then come to understand that your own strengths have limits, but divine hands know no barriers. This thought, while it can sound challenging, brings the peace you've been seeking. It's not that you've become immune to problems, but because you've discovered that you can walk without carrying the world on your shoulders. Now think back to a specific moment when you felt it was necessary to make a decision, but fear tried to convince you that it wouldn't work out. It's likely that there were internal voices telling you it was better to back down, and perhaps some external voices reinforced the idea that the risk would be significant. But you moved forward, maybe not out of full self-confidence, but from a spark of hope. This is the essence of what we call a leap of faith. You look within yourself and, despite your fears, choose to trust that God may be guiding the circumstances. Even if no one else understands, you feel there is a greater purpose. This purpose often only reveals itself when we look back, realizing how much we have grown along the way. It is at this moment that the phrase, "be strong and courageous," becomes an anchor. It is not just a religious motto, but a declaration that awakens courage amid uncertainty. From now on, it's worth taking some time to reflect. What do you hope to achieve from this journey? What is the root of the desire that drives you? Perhaps you want to heal emotional wounds, find lost peace, or simply experience God's presence in a closer and more real way. There is no right or wrong answer, as everyone has different reasons and stories. However, when you allow yourself to dive into this questioning, you become more aware of your motivations, creating a foundation for your steps to have direction. God doesn't want you to walk blindly, but He also doesn't serve up all the answers on a silver platter. It is in the balance between sincere seeking and faith that true transformation occurs. Take a notebook or any place where you can jot down your thoughts. Write not only tangible goals, but also what you hope to feel throughout this journey. Perhaps it's serenity amid the turmoil. Maybe it's the courage to confront old behavior patterns. It could be that you wish to find a new purpose in your life and are willing to start over. Write down your desires, your prayers, and your deepest longings. This simple act of putting pen to paper helps organize what's inside you. Then, set aside a moment for a short prayer, something that is true and comes from the depths of your heart, even if it's just a sentence. "Lord, I want to move forward without fear." The beginning of this journey also involves recognizing that no matter how much you plan, some paths may change. God often acts in unexpected ways, especially when you think everything is under control. But this shouldn't be a reason for anxiety or discouragement. On the contrary, it can become an opportunity to experience care that transcends logical explanations. It's incredible to realize that even when you don't see a way out, a door opens in an unlikely place. Or even if the solution doesn't come in the form you imagined, you discover inner strengths you didn't even know you had. It is in this process that faith transforms from theory into daily practice, changing the way you see the world and yourself. When you read Joshua 1:9, try to incorporate those words into your daily routine. Instead of viewing it as a distant verse, apply it to the small challenges you face every day. If you need to make a decision at work, remember to be strong and of good courage. If a family conflict arises, bring that same phrase to mind. Far from being something magical, it is a constant reminder that you are not walking alone. Confidence is fed by repetition. The more you remember that there is a greater power guiding your every step, the easier it becomes to let go of fear. This doesn't mean you will never feel insecure again, but it does mean that insecurity no longer has permission to dictate your life. Often people think they need to have enormous faith to begin any spiritual journey. However, walking with God starts with a mustard seed, something small yet alive. The size of your initial feeling does not determine how much you can grow. What matters is your willingness to continue on, even if you stumble from time to time. You don't have to pretend to be perfect, just be honest. If you are feeling tired, talk to God about it. If you are excited, thank Him for that energy. The journey is built on truth, without the need to cover up weaknesses. Each step reinforces the awareness that you are guided by a power capable of turning seemingly impossible situations around. Give yourself the chance to not know everything. The beginning is filled with uncertainties, but it is also rich in discoveries. When you are humble enough to admit that you don't have all the answers, it becomes easier to open yourself up to divine wisdom. It is likely that along this path you will meet people whose stories and experiences reaffirm your conviction that you are headed in the right direction. You may also encounter voices that make you doubt the importance of that faith. However, your commitment is not to external opinions, but to your own truth and the personal relationship you wish to nurture with God. You may be wondering how long this journey will last. The truth is that there is no endpoint for those who choose to trust. It is a continuous process that renews itself with each dawn. What changes is how you face the obstacles. With every challenge you overcome, you realize how real the divine presence is and how much firmer your steps become. Even though life is full of phases, some more turbulent than others, in each stage you carry within you the memory of a determined beginning inspired by Joshua 1:9. It's as if this verse begins to accompany you, reminding you of how valuable it is to remain courageous. Ultimately, what distinguishes someone who begins this journey from someone who does not is not the absence of doubts, but the willingness to face the unknown with faith. You are choosing to say, "I accept being taken beyond my fears." It may seem like a simple phrase, but it carries the weight of many experiences, dreams, and prayers. Fearlessly, you launch yourself forward with the assurance that God is in control. This marks the true beginning of a new chapter. Now take a few minutes to talk with your own thoughts. Reflect on what is happening in your heart and try to be sincere when writing about your goals on this path. Write down what you wish to surrender, what you hope to receive, and what you want to transform. In doing so, you are not just making a list, but creating a personal covenant with the process that is starting. Each line written becomes a declaration of intention, something that will help you remember your starting point when you are further along. You will discover that you are not alone. Throughout the coming steps, other texts, reflections, and moments of prayer will provide clarity on the divine presence in your life. The anxiety that has so often tried to take control will gradually give way to trust. With every small victory, you will remember that there is a God who cares for every detail, even those you didn't even know how to name. And so, welcome to this first stage of your journey. There's no need for grand formalities, as this is a direct dialogue, heart to heart, where faith blooms in the soil of sincerity and openness to the new. You may have felt invisible at some point. The hustle and bustle of everyday life causes many people to pass by one another without noticing glances, expressions, or silent struggles. Then Psalm 139 emerges to remind you that there is someone who knows every detail of your life. There is no randomness in your steps. There is no word you utter that isn't fully understood. This may initially sound daunting, but it soon becomes a balm for the restlessness of the heart. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? That, the psalmist asks, making it clear that there is no loneliness when you trust in the Lord. You might be in a dark room, surrounded by people, or traveling far away. Still, this loving presence continues to accompany you. The idea of being seen in all your fullness can evoke different reactions. You might fear that your mistakes and failures will be exposed, that your innermost thoughts will be judged. However, at the same time, there is beauty in knowing that God does not ignore your pains, your doubts, your deepest desires. He sees not only what you show to the world, but also what you keep within, and even so, He calls you close. When the psalmist speaks of being surrounded on all sides, he describes the assurance that you are not abandoned for even a moment. You too can carry this certainty, especially on days when loneliness and lack of understanding insist on knocking at your door. In today's world, so often people seek attention and approval on social media or in specific groups, trying to fill a void that seems endless. Yet when you read Psalm 139 thoughtfully, and allow its words to penetrate your heart, you discover that true security comes from the conviction of being known. This does not depend on likes or compliments, but on the intimate awareness that there is a God who formed you in your mother's womb and knows every cell of your being. This awareness can be transformative as it changes how you see yourself and values your existence. You realize that you are not the result of mere chance, but rather the outcome of a careful plan. Even though the circumstances around you may be turbulent, there is a purpose that remains steadfast. Try setting aside some time to read all of Psalm 139. Go through it verse by verse, allowing each word to resonate with your emotions. If there's a phrase that stands out to you, jot it down. Ask yourself, why did this touch my heart right now? It might be that one phrase speaks about God's omnipresence, while another emphasizes his intimate creation of you. Whatever passage shines the brightest in your eyes, consider that it could be a way for God to whisper something specific to you. Often, in our busy lives, we let these whispers go unnoticed. The practice of writing down 3 verses that impact you is a way to make this experience tangible, turning it into a source of ongoing reflection. Next, take these notes into a moment of prayer. It doesn't have to be long or filled with elaborate words. Just have a sincere dialogue where you say, "Lord, what do you want to tell me through this text?" Spend a few moments in silence. It's common for the mind to wander and start thinking about the day's tasks, but try at least for a few minutes to remain open to any impressions or feelings that may arise. Don't expect to necessarily hear voices or have visions. Sometimes the divine response manifests as a peace that fills your heart or a gentle assurance that everything is under control. Allow yourself to be enveloped by this tranquility. Reflecting on Psalm 139, recognize that it is not just a beautiful or poetic text. It serves as a living reminder that your story has value. When it states that God searches and knows your heart, it goes beyond a superficial analysis. It is a comprehensive understanding that encompasses your past, present, and even the dreams you haven't voiced. God understands even the conflicts you cannot explain. At the same time, He offers acceptance. If you have experienced rejections or misunderstandings in the past, this psalm acts as a balm, reminding you that there is someone who loves unconditionally. Some people live in search of a sense of belonging. They long to find a place where they can be themselves without masks or defenses. This place, however distant it may seem, can be found in a relationship with God. He does not force entry, but invites closeness, even when there are wounds that bleed. Perhaps you are weary of so many demands or voices trying to shape your identity to serve their interests. However, in Psalm 139, you find a voice that says, "I formed you, I know you, I care." These words can fill old gaps and bring more brightness to your days. It is important to emphasize that this process of feeling seen and loved by God does not happen instantly. Sometimes it takes time to let go of the belief that we need to earn this affection. When you realize that divine love is an unconditional gift, you relax and allow yourself to receive. This does not mean that life becomes free of challenges. There will still be moments when you question your worth and feel insecurity. However, the difference is that now you know there is a safe place to take these questions. There is a Father who understands every nuance of your longings, even when you cannot find the right words. If Psalm 139 speaks of a presence that surrounds us on all sides, then there is no room for absolute loneliness. You might think, even so, I miss physical hugs and having people around. That's natural, as we are relational beings. However, when life doesn't provide the support you expected, the assurance of being seen and loved by God can serve as a foundation to sustain hope. Remember that you are not abandoned in this world. There is a purpose, even when life's storms attempt to obscure that truth. Gradually, you develop the confidence that each of your steps, even if uncertain, is observed by loving eyes. Some practical questions may arise, but how can I feel this presence in my daily life when problems are piling up and I can hardly breathe? The answer isn't simple, but it begins with short moments of pause. It could be upon waking, before reaching for your phone, or as you lie down when the house falls silent. In that moment, take a break to turn your thoughts to God, thanking Him for being alive, asking for strength for the day, or simply sharing a concern that troubles you. Don't underestimate the power of these moments. They may seem trivial, but they help you reconnect with the truth that you are not alone. By repeating this habit, you create a space in which the divine presence becomes more perceptible amidst the hustle and bustle. You may have heard the words, "God is with you," many times, and because of that, you might have lost some of the impact they carry. In Psalm 139, the psalmist is not speaking in general terms. He portrays himself as someone deeply known. The same is true for you. It's not just someone saying that God is near in a hollow way. It's the reality that no matter how much you try to hide, run away, or downplay your worth, God is right there, steadfast, ready to embrace and guide you. Therefore, it is worth diving into each verse, allowing it to become a mirror that reflects your own questions, while simultaneously revealing the tenderness of the Creator. In the end, you'll notice that Psalm 139 is meant not only for moments of joy, but also for days when everything seems confusing. When circumstances don't cooperate and you feel misunderstood or overlooked, remember that there is a God who searches you and knows you. This certainty nurtures the hope that, even amid darkness, there is a light that never fails. This light illuminates your steps, restoring the courage you thought you had lost. And when you feel embraced and loved, it becomes easier to find your way back to balance. Roots of insecurity. Have you noticed that some fears seem to take root in the past, as if certain old experiences still echo in every step you take today? It's hard to understand why we become so anxious in situations that seem simple to others. Most of the time, these reactions have deep motivations tied to something that happened long ago. It's as if we live in a constant state of defense, carrying the feeling that any present event could reopen poorly healed wounds. In the Bible, there's an emblematic passage that illustrates this well. Jacob was afraid to meet his brother Esau after taking the blessing that, in theory, belonged to him. Genesis 32. Jacob's fear stemmed not just from the current moment, but from a history marked by deception and family rivalries. He knew that at some point he would have to face the consequences of his actions. And it is precisely in this confrontation between the guilt of the past and the uncertainty of the future that anxiety often manifests. You might also carry memories that disturb you even without realizing it. It could be a harsh word you heard in childhood, a traumatic situation in your teenage years, or a time when you felt abandoned. In many cases, anxiety blossoms as a response to these old chapters, as the heart creates defense mechanisms to prevent that suffering from recurring. But by being overly protective, the mind ends up wasting energy and remains on high alert, as if any resemblance to the past triggers a danger signal. When Jacob decided to face Esau, he also chose to confront his history. This was not simple. The text in Genesis 32 shows a man torn between the desire to flee and the hope that God would intervene. And indeed, God was present, not only in the form of a meeting that turned out better than expected, but, more importantly, in Jacob's inner transformation. He needed to remember who he was, and more importantly, who God is. You can do something similar. Instead of completely avoiding painful memories, it's worth revisiting certain moments from the past to understand why specific situations in the present cause you so much anxiety. This isn't about irresponsibly reliving suffering, but rather seeking healing. When you bring these memories before God, You acknowledge that you no longer want to be trapped by the traumas preventing you from moving forward. It might feel uncomfortable at first, as our tendency is to sweep everything under the rug. However, what remains unaddressed continues to act in secret. The fear of being rejected, for instance, may have originated long ago, at a time when you felt left out by your own family or friends. Now, every time there's a chance of disapproval, your body reacts as if it's reliving that abandonment. The story of Jacob and Esau also shows that reconciliation is possible, even after a long time. Genesis 33 describes the encounter where Esau, instead of attacking, runs to embrace his brother. Sometimes the outcome is better than what we feared, because our minds often paint catastrophic scenarios. Other times, even if everything isn't perfect, the act of seeking repair or offering forgiveness is already a great relief. You don't have to continue this journey of healing alone. The Bible itself contains numerous accounts of people who found peace amid their internal conflicts by turning to God. And this inner movement doesn't have to be filled with complicated ceremonies. Just come in prayer and sincerely express that you are tired of carrying these burdens. This is what is recorded in Matthew 11:28, when Jesus invites the weary and burdened to come to him for relief. If you want to put this reflection into practice, it's helpful to write a list of painful situations that have marked your history. Think about moments that still evoke sadness, guilt, or resentment. Then, present each item to God in prayer. Something like, "Lord, this still hurts me today. Heal my heart and strengthen my faith so that I don't remain trapped in what has passed." You may need to repeat this request several times, but gradually you will start to feel some change. Perhaps the people around you don't understand why you feel anxious in certain situations. They might think you're being dramatic or overreacting. But only those who have experienced that pain know how much it throbs. Still, there's the possibility of sharing this with someone you trust, whether it's a spiritual counselor, a therapist, or a close friend. Opening up and receiving a listening ear helps reorganize your emotions and realize that you're not strange or fragile for feeling what you feel. Anxiety also has a way of distorting our self-perception. You look in the mirror and see someone full of flaws, inadequate, and even unworthy of love. However, when you remember that God created you and loves you, you start to question that inner voice that only points out your defects. The path to security might involve understanding that your worth doesn't depend on others' approval or constant success, but on the fact that you are supported by a greater love. Revisiting old traumas doesn't mean being stuck in the past. On the contrary, it's a way to free yourself from it. When you acknowledge the origins of your insecurity, you can choose new emotional responses to the situations that arise now. Instead of reacting automatically with panic, you breathe, pray, and remember that you're no longer in the circumstances of the past. Today is different from yesterday, and there is a God who walks with you every step of your life. In this process, it's normal to feel vulnerable, as everything you've been holding inside starts to emerge. However, vulnerability, when exposed to divine care, becomes a source of growth. Those who confront their shadows often emerge stronger than those who go through life pretending they don't exist. And you don't need to be afraid to present these shadows to God, because He already knows all the nuances of your heart and is not startled by them. It can also be helpful to think about how Jacob was transformed. He not only resolved the issue with Esau, but also received a new name and a new identity. Genesis 32:28. It's as if God was saying, you don't have to be defined by your mistakes or what the past says about you. Likewise, you can open yourself up to a redefinition of who you are today, letting go of the burdens of guilt and fear that have followed you for so long. Of course, this type of change doesn't usually happen overnight. Even if you pray, go to therapy, and work hard to avoid negative thoughts, it's possible that anxiety may return from time to time. This doesn't mean you're failing in your faith. It simply means that your mind and heart are in the process of healing. Some wounds require time, but every step taken is a move toward freedom. If at any point you feel stuck, remember that it's okay to seek specialized help. God can use doctors, psychologists, and therapists to bring relief and clarity. Some may resist this kind of support, believing that prayer alone is sufficient. However, if resources are available, there's no shame in using them. Healing can come in many forms, and the most important thing is to realize that you don't have to face everything alone. At the core, what makes anxiety thrive so powerfully is the feeling of helplessness. The painful past screams that it could happen again, and you feel vulnerable. But when you invite God into your story, you acknowledge that there is a safe harbor, someone who walks alongside you and doesn't condemn you for past mistakes. In this environment of trust, anxiety loses its hold, because the heart understands that it doesn't have to fight every battle alone. You may carry memories of injustices you've suffered or decisions you regret. Both can be sources of anxiety. The first creates fear of suffering again, while the second brings unresolved guilt. However, neither of these situations is permanent. As you progress in this process of revisiting the past with God, you realize that you can forgive yourself for your mistakes and also heal the pain of having been hurt. Jacob, after everything, realized he needed something greater than a simple plan for reconciliation. He had to kneel and acknowledge his limitations, asking for protection and grace. Genesis 32, 9-12. When he sensed the divine presence, he understood that he wasn't alone. Similarly, each painful memory can serve as a reminder that even though things may have been tough, God is present today. If you haven't made your list of situations that hurt you the most, now might be a good time. Remember, this isn't an exercise in reliving all the bad things. It's about opening these episodes to the restoring action of the Father. So, after writing each one down, say in prayer, "Heal my heart and strengthen my faith." You may not feel an immediate change, but this step is crucial for gradually treating old wounds. Sometimes, in bringing these memories to light, you may also discover that you need to ask someone for forgiveness or offer forgiveness to those who have hurt you. This process is painful but liberating. Without it, anxiety finds shelter in resentment or guilt, and you continue to struggle internally. With forgiveness, even if the relationship doesn't return to what it once was, you diminish the power that negative memory had over you. This is a crucial point. It's not necessary for the other person to acknowledge their mistake for you to decide to forgive. Forgiveness is an act on your part, a way to release the bonds that tie you to the painful event. Jacob was unsure how Esau would react, but even before knowing, he prepared for the reunion. His attitude indicated a willingness to rectify the past. You cannot control the reactions of others, but you can choose to take care of your own soul. All this may seem challenging, but remember that there is a promise that God does not abandon those who seek Him. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says that He will lighten the burdens of the weary. This promise also applies when you are exhausted from fear, worn out from feeling like your past defines your entire future. By surrendering each memory, you make room for a new perspective, one that is less burdened by anticipation and suffering. If you feel uncertain about what to do next, a simple tip is to set aside a few minutes each day to meditate on Bible verses that bring comfort and hope. It could be Psalm 23, which describes the Lord as a shepherd and provider, or any other passages that speak of care and protection. This practice helps counteract the internal voices that insist on recalling your pain, anchoring your mind in what cultivates peace and confidence. Many people have testified that by facing their past wounds with divine help, they were able to find meaning even in the darkest times. Not that everything was good, but in the pain, they discovered an opportunity to mature, to draw closer to God, and to develop empathy for those who suffer similarly. You may also find that your scars can help others facing challenges similar to yours. Ultimately, insecurity tends to lose its grip when you accept that your worth isn't tied to traumas or unhappy situations. You are not the mistake you made, nor the victim who suffered at the hands of others. You are someone who can rewrite their own narrative in light of a greater truth. God sees who you are, loves who you are, and can transform your story into something precious. Therefore, remembering is not about reliving the suffering, but giving yourself the chance to close cycles that have remained open. Just as Jacob had to face Esau to move forward, you can confront old pain to allow for healing. Each prayer and every step towards reconciliation with your past is a victory in the battle against anxiety. Resting without giving up. Have you noticed how some people go through the same difficulties as you, yet seem to maintain their serenity while you feel tense, almost drowning in worries? The difference may lie in how each person deals with the need for pause and trust. Resting in God doesn't mean throwing everything up in the air and pretending that responsibilities don't exist. Rather, it's about recognizing that even with so many tasks, there is a refuge where the heart can realign with the peace that God offers. There is a direct invitation in the words of Jesus in Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." This doesn't imply that you stop working or fulfilling your role in the family, but it means there can be an internal dimension where you rest your mind and hand over the weight you can no longer carry. Those looking from the outside might think, "But you're still doing so much, how don't you go crazy?" Yet, inside, you've found a place of calm, as if being supported by something greater. This is what happens when, even amidst the rush, you take conscious pauses to breathe, pray, and remember that you are not alone. Some people call this resting while being productive, because the soul remains at peace, even if the body is active. You might find it hard to accept this invitation from Jesus. You think that if you're not always busy, you'll be accused of laziness or irresponsibility. However, resting is not giving up. It's simply refusing the frantic pace that leads to exhaustion and chronic anxiety. If your day feels overloaded, try to cut back or delegate something, talk to those around you and see who can help. Often, the overwhelm comes from the impression that you have to solve everything on your own. Also, try scheduling a day off to practice what some call creative idleness. It could involve taking a walk in a park, reading a book that inspires your faith, praying in silence, or simply doing nothing for a while and observing nature. It seems simple, but it's an act that challenges the culture of doing all the time. If Jesus, who had so much to accomplish, withdrew to pray and be alone, why can't we? It's true that there are times when this feels impossible, especially if you're caring for someone sick, have young children, or work 2 jobs. Even so, small breaks can be squeezed in here and there. Perhaps 10 minutes in the morning to contemplate a psalm, or just to close your eyes and express gratitude. These moments can change the tone of your day, as they serve as reminders that God has not abandoned you. Resting in God also helps reduce self-imposed pressure. When you understand that you don't need to control everything, you can shed that feeling that if something goes wrong, it's your fault. Sometimes anxiety arises from perfectionism. Any failure seems unacceptable. However, by allowing yourself to rest, you recognize that you are doing your best and entrusting the rest to the one who governs all. If you still have doubts, remember that in various biblical passages, there are accounts of people who lived intensely but found renewal in God. David himself, the author of many psalms, faced battles on all sides and carried the responsibilities of a king, yet he found time to sing and meditate in the divine presence. This heartfelt song was a way to give rest to the soul, strengthening faith to face problems with less agitation. You may also need to reassess your priorities. Sometimes, a lot of the tension stems from striving for goals that aren't that significant, but which society or social media push upon us. When you ask yourself what is essential, you realize there are things that can wait or even be cut out. Slowing down is not laziness, it's wisdom to recognize that the body and mind have limits. If there's something that has been draining all your energy, take a moment to pray about it. Talk to God about your worries, confess that you feel pressured, and ask for guidance. You might be surprised by the clarity that follows this moment. Sometimes what's missing is simply seeing another solution, a different approach, or a straightforward no to more commitments. Resting without giving up is an act of faith, as you relinquish absolute control and declare that you trust in divine provision. It's not about folding your arms, but acting with the certainty that there is a greater support. It's like walking with steady steps, knowing that you are not alone. This mindset does not eliminate all problems, but it redefines how to face them. It can happen that you're caught up in a whirlwind of activity and still feel a strange peace inside, as if something is holding up your thoughts. This is the effect of leaning on God. Some people refer to it as a light burden because it echoes Jesus' words. The load becomes lighter when he helps to carry it. Taking care of yourself is also an important part of rest. If anxiety is high, it might be necessary to adjust your sleep, diet, and even incorporate some light exercise. You're not a machine, and even though faith is essential, your body is still physical and needs specific care. Remember that your own well-being contributes to your ability to fulfill your duties and serve others healthily. Another thing that helps you relax is recalling times when you've pushed through obstacles. Perhaps during a period of unemployment when everything seemed lost, something happened and you managed to rise again. Or during an illness that seemed severe but eventually led to treatment and recovery. Bringing to mind what you have already overcome boosts your confidence that God will also act in your current situations. If it's really difficult to do this alone, seek a support group, whether in church or another setting. Talking to people who understand your dilemmas and can pray with you lightens the burden you feel. Anxiety loves isolation, as negative thoughts find fertile ground there. When you open up in fellowship, you discover that you're not the only one fighting, and you draw strength from the overcoming experiences of others. The rest that God offers is not passivity. It's not about leaving things to chance or ignoring reality. Rather, it's a shift in posture where you acknowledge your limitations and entrust what is beyond your control. By doing this, you regain energy to better handle what is your responsibility. And you find that you can take pleasure in activities that once only caused stress, as emotional overload diminishes. If there's something preventing you from finding rest, like a big project or a difficult family situation, try facing these challenges through faith. Pray for clarity, read passages that inspire you, and seek wise counsel. Then take action on what you can. But avoid diving into the agony of wanting to solve everything in one day. God's timing is not always our timing, but the relief of being able to rely on Him is immediate for those willing to trust. Some people struggle with feelings of guilt for not being everywhere or meeting every demand. You might feel this way, always thinking you owe something to someone. Remember, there's only one omnipresent and omnipotent being, and that is not us. God understands your limits, and if you are doing the best you can, you should not condemn yourself for what exceeds your capacity. At this point, resting also means accepting human help. If someone offers to watch your child for a few hours, to share a work task, or to listen while you vent, don't refuse. God may use these people to lighten your load. Resisting this support often comes from pride or fear of being a burden, but no one was created to walk completely alone. Those who manage to incorporate moments of rest throughout their routine find that life flows better. Tensions don't magically disappear, but they lose the power to throw you off balance. You learn to say no when necessary, to prioritize what truly matters, and to appreciate moments of contemplation and gratitude. This is essential in the battle against anxiety, as reducing the overload lessens the trigger for constant stress. If you still think that resting is a waste of time, remember that God instituted periods of rest for His people since the Old Testament, such as the day of rest. This reinforces the idea that we were not made to work non-stop. Even the land needed rest every few years, according to the laws given to Israel, to renew itself. Why should it be any different for us, who are much more complex than the soil? Resting without giving up can become a lifestyle rather than an exception. The first step is to recognize the value of this choice. The second step is to put it into practice, even if at a gradual pace. You might find a few minutes at first, but that is already progress. And as you feel how beneficial it is, you will create room for more breaks and more confidence. Finally, reflect on the phrase, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." It's not an empty slogan, but a true promise. You can approach Jesus with whatever baggage you have, even with doubts and fears. He doesn't expect you to arrive perfect, but to arrive sincerely. When you allow your heart to be touched by this divine care, exhaustion loses its grip and hope is renewed. Wisdom from Proverbs for decision-making. Often, anxiety strikes when we have to make important decisions. The mind fills with what-ifs and maybes, painting complicated scenarios that leave us feeling uncertain. In these moments, it's common to feel as if you're facing a maze, unsure of which path to choose. But in the Bible, we find a recommendation that brings balance. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Proverbs 3:5. This passage highlights the importance of not relying solely on one's own reasoning, but including God in the decision-making process. It's not about disregarding logic or reflection, but rather acknowledging that human wisdom has its limits. When you recognize this and seek divine guidance, you'll find that much anxiety dissipates because you no longer bear the weight of solving everything alone. Some may think that praying before making a decision is a waste of time. However, the truth may be quite the opposite. Proverbs 3:6 adds, "In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." In other words, by involving God in your choices, you gain a kind of clarity that you might not achieve on your own. It doesn't mean everything will become obvious all at once, but it does mean you begin to see nuances and opportunities with greater discernment. Of course, this does not absolve you of responsibility. It is essential to weigh the pros and cons and seek reliable information. But above all, keep your heart open to the divine voice. Sometimes a verse will jump out at you, or a wise person will come along with the right advice, or you may even feel a special peace regarding one of the paths. These signs could be part of the answer to your prayers. Whatever decision is causing you distress, bring it before God, honestly. You might say something like, "Lord, I need to know if I should go this way or that. I ask for discernment and that my impulses don't lead me to make mistakes." Then stay attentive to the doors that open or close, the impressions you feel when meditating on the Bible, and the conversations that arise in your daily life. Another tip is to seek advice from trustworthy people. The same book of Proverbs states that in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Proverbs 11:14. If you talk to those who have experience or wisdom in the area where you need to make a decision, you might discover aspects you hadn't considered. This doesn't mean you should blindly follow what others say, but rather use their perspectives to refine your own understanding. Often, anxiety leads us to irrational haste, wanting to resolve everything immediately. However, it isn't always necessary to have an instant answer. It's perfectly okay to wait a bit until things become clearer. During this time, it's good to keep praying without falling into total inertia. If, however, the deadline is tight and there's no way to delay, trust that God also acts in urgent moments, providing what is essential so you don't feel paralyzed. Some decisions seem too big, such as choosing a college major, moving to a new city, changing jobs, or starting a serious relationship. It's normal for these things to cause anxiety as they impact important areas of life. But when you lean on the advice of Proverbs 3:5-6, you realize that you're not alone. There is a God who cares about every detail and has no issue being consulted on these matters. You may have had negative experiences where you made a rushed decision and later regretted it. This can also create fear of making another mistake, increasing anxiety even more. However, the Christian faith teaches that God knows our hearts and can redirect our steps, even if we take a few wrong shortcuts. Of course, this is not an excuse for acting recklessly, but a reminder that there is always the possibility to get back on the right path. If that's the case, bring up a specific decision that is causing distress. Write down all the relevant factors. Deadlines, financial impacts, emotional consequences, risks and benefits. Then present this list to God in prayer. After that, remain silent for a few moments, allowing this act of surrender to calm your spirit. Sometimes the answer doesn't come immediately, but you may feel a subtle peace indicating that you will be taken care of, regardless of the outcome. Another practice that helps is to ask yourself, does this choice bring me closer to God and the values I consider important? If the answer is no, it may be a sign that the path isn't right. However, if upon reflection you realize there is consistency with biblical principles, you can move forward with greater confidence. The Word of God often serves as a filter to distinguish what is worthwhile from what merely seems advantageous in the short term. If anxiety arises strongly, remember that God does not distance himself because of your fear or insecurity. He understands your limitations and is willing to guide you, even in the most confusing moments of life. There's no need to feel ashamed to pray, saying, I'm afraid of making a mistake, but I trust that you have the best for me. This kind of transparency helps strengthen the bond with your Heavenly Father. When you finally make a decision, take responsibility for it and move forward. If you later realize that something is going very wrong, you can still seek guidance and make adjustments. The important thing is not to remain stagnant due to anxiety, allowing fear to paralyze any initiative. Making a decision involves risks, but faith brings the assurance that you are not left to chance. As you practice this method, praying, reflecting, listening to advice, and trusting in divine guidance, you develop a deeper sense of inner strength. Each victory, no matter how small, nourishes the belief that Proverbs 3:5-6 is not an empty slogan, but a truth that works in real life. Over time, anxiety diminishes and courage arises to make bolder decisions aligned with God's purpose. Example of Miriam and worship that frees. Imagine the scene described in Exodus 15. The people of Israel had just crossed the Red Sea, escaping from deadly danger. Instead of just continuing their journey, Miriam and the women took their instruments and began to dance and sing. That was the expression of profound joy, a result of their certainty that God had acted supernaturally. It may seem simple, but there is powerful meaning in this episode. Worship can free the heart from tension and worry, bringing a lightness that combats anxiety. You might notice how genuine worship, in the form of songs or praises, calms the spirit. In an instant, your mind is filled with problems, thinking about bills to pay, family conflicts, or professional goals. But as you sing something that exalts divine faithfulness, a sense of relief emerges. Anxiety cannot withstand when the heart chooses to surrender before the Creator, remembering that He is greater than any adversity. Miriam led the women in that moment, playing her tambourine and repeating, "Sing to the Lord, for He has triumphed gloriously." Exodus 15:21. Perhaps the people still had a long journey ahead in the desert, but that celebration anticipated the certainty that they were not alone. If God had already performed wonders, He would do so again. Sometimes that's what you need, to look back and realize how many times God has acted in your favor, and then praise Him, trusting that He will continue to guide the future. Choosing a song that highlights God's faithfulness and singing or listening to it during moments of anxiety can be an effective remedy. As the melody flows, you connect with the truths presented in the Bible, reminding yourself that God does not change and is never late. Your heart, in turn, finds space to rest as worship places problems in the right perspective. They don't disappear like magic, but they stop occupying the center of your attention. Miriam was not the only one in the Bible to use praise as a weapon against insecurity. David repeatedly composed psalms to express both his anguish and his confidence in divine care. When you praise, you are, in a way, realigning your focus. Instead of getting stuck on the mountain of worries, you turn toward the God who controls all things. This act of surrendering each longing in a song strengthens faith and brings joy to the soul. You might feel embarrassed to sing or think that you don't have a good voice, but remember that God is not looking for artistic talent. What matters is sincerity. If you prefer, listen to someone else sing and join in with your heart, or write your own words of gratitude and praise, even if they aren't very poetic. The key is that worship is genuine, springing from the depths of someone who acknowledges divine greatness. Another interesting point is that Miriam did not celebrate alone. She gathered the women and danced as a group. Community worship can be even more powerful, as it unites hearts that recognize the same hope. If you belong to a congregation, cherish the moments of collective praise. It's an opportunity to exchange heavy burdens for songs that proclaim divine care, strengthening not only yourself but everyone who joins in this expression of faith. If you're having one of those days when everything seems to go wrong, try stopping for a few minutes and playing a song about God's love. Close your eyes, if possible, and let the words touch your inner self. Tears may flow, but that can also be part of the release. Worship connects you to something greater than the setbacks you face, reminding you that just as the people of Israel saw the sea part, you too can witness incredible things happening in your story. In many testimonies from people who have dealt with anxiety, worship appears as an immediate relief during crises. As they sing, they report feeling their minds clear and their distress diminish. It's not just psychological suggestion. It's a real spiritual dimension where fear and uncertainty make way for trust and gratitude. Miriam exemplifies this attitude. She did not hesitate to exalt the one who made it possible to cross the sea on dry land. When you think of the scene, try to imagine the vibe of people celebrating, jumping for joy, playing instruments, and proclaiming how great their God is. Rest assured, challenges lay ahead, as the journey through the desert was long. But in that moment, they chose to emphasize the miracle they had received. Anxiety often pushes us into constant worry, while worship reminds us of the divine interventions that have already taken place. When you bring this habit into your daily life, you transform trivial moments into opportunities for praise. A household chore can be done to the sound of hymns, and your commute to work can include songs that make you reflect on the divine presence. Over time, this creates a solid emotional and spiritual foundation to withstand the storms of anxious thoughts that try to take root. If you want something more specific, choose a song that speaks to your heart. When anxiety hits hard, play it or sing a few verses. Remember how Miriam wasn't afraid to express herself, for she knew that victory came from the Lord. So do the same in your reality, proclaiming that if God has acted before, he is powerful to act again. It's not about denying problems, but about refusing to give them the power to steal your peace. In worship, you declare that your hope is not in perfect circumstances, but in a faithful God. This conviction makes all the difference, as anxiety loses strength when confronted with the truth that there is someone greater than any challenge. If you're feeling uninspired, read Exodus 15:1-21 and pay attention to the details. Notice how the song's lyrics celebrate victory over enemies and exalt divine sovereignty. There's something therapeutic about singing praises that highlight God's greatness. You begin to remember that his power knows no bounds, so why would it be impossible to overcome your anxiety or any other problem? Miriam is an example of courage and spontaneity in the way of worship. She danced without shame, celebrating with body and soul the deliverance that the Lord had granted. You may feel more reserved, but you can show your worship in other ways. The essential thing is the heart that surrenders, not the outward performance. And when that praise comes from within, it brings freedom. Fellowship, a remedy. Against isolation. Anxiety is often fueled by the feeling of having to deal with everything alone, without support or understanding. When we live in isolation, our negative thoughts tend to multiply, and it's easy to believe that no one can or wants to help. However, in the biblical context, community life is seen as essential. In Galatians 6:2, we are instructed to bear one another's burdens, and this is not by chance. Being in community means having people with whom you can pray, talk openly, and even laugh amid difficulties. When you share what you feel, you realize that you're not the only one facing anxiety, fear, or insecurity. This discovery brings a sense of relief because loneliness worsens any distress. However, opening up isn't always easy, as there's often a fear of judgment or rejection. If you're not yet part of a faith group or community, consider taking that step. It could be a Bible study group, a prayer meeting, or even a small circle of friends who share the same values. The important thing is to have a safe environment where you can talk about your struggles and, most importantly, receive prayer and counsel. For many, this has been crucial in overcoming critical phases of anxiety. You might think that the church or these gatherings are places where everyone seems perfect and doesn't understand your battles. But in reality, many there also have their internal struggles. When conversations begin, stories emerge that resonate with yours, creating empathy. You realize that faith doesn't eliminate vulnerability, but offers resources to cope with it in a healthier way. The advice in Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burdens, works well in practice. By hearing what someone else is going through, you also find encouragement. There's an exchange of strength that enables everyone to leave feeling stronger than when they arrived. This approach is different from seeking only superficial distractions, as it involves a posture of mutual care and sincere prayer. In some cases, this fellowship deepens friendships that last for years and become a safe haven for a lifetime. Even when anxiety hits hard, knowing that you can reach out to someone, sending a message asking for prayer or advice, changes the situation. You no longer feel so defenseless because there is a support network. If all of this is still very new to you, start by looking for a Christian community that has small groups or cells. It's usually easier to forge connections in these smaller settings than in large gatherings. Introduce yourself, share a bit about who you are, and approach it without high expectations, just with an open heart. Gradually, a sense of trust may develop, allowing you to share your insecurities. Of course, not every group will be perfect, as people are flawed. You might encounter someone who doesn't handle your revelations well, but don't give up because of that. There are many places where love for one another and the sensitivity to listen are present. Persisting in this search can be rewarding, as God designed us to live in relationship, not in isolation. Fellowship doesn't magically solve all problems, but it lessens the feeling that the whole world is on your shoulders. You'll discover that you can receive practical help, like someone willing to accompany you to a medical exam or offer advice about a financial issue. Additionally, there's the simple comfort of an honest conversation, where you can cry without fear. There's also the other side. When you make yourself available to support someone in the group who is in crisis, you feel useful and realize that your own pain can generate empathy and compassion. Anxiety, which often makes us very self-centered, is diminished when we start to care about someone else's well-being. This mutual care reflects the purpose of Galatians 6:2. Don't underestimate the power of collective prayer. Sometimes you may arrive at a meeting feeling bad or discouraged and leave feeling renewed. There's something special about knowing that more voices are interceding for you before God. The Bible recounts various situations where people united in prayer and saw extraordinary results. This is not emotional manipulation, but a practice of faith that has stood the test of time. If you already belong to a community but haven't found your place yet, consider getting involved in a ministry or small group. When we begin to serve alongside others, the bonds strengthen. Additionally, healthy engagement in something that makes sense to us often brings satisfaction and a sense of belonging, which helps alleviate loneliness and anxiety. Some people testify that during the height of their crises, they almost gave up on everything, but were sustained by fellowship. Someone noticed their absence and stepped in, offering help or simply a listening ear. This kind of care is a practical expression of Christian love. So if you see someone isolating themselves, you can also take the first step, as that person may not have the strength to ask for help. Anxiety loves to thrive in darkness, where fear grows to monstrous proportions. In the presence of people who love and pray, light appears, and what once seemed terrifying can reveal itself to be less threatening than imagined. Together, we can remind each other of what the Bible says about security and trust in God, countering the voice of worry and panic. As individual as your pursuit of emotional balance may be, fellowship provides support so you don't lose heart when things don't improve as quickly as you would like. There will be tough days, but hearing "I'm praying for you" warms the heart. It can be the spark that keeps you from giving up. It is during these times that we realize how much we need one another. Perhaps the biggest barrier is the fear of being judged, of others thinking you are weak or have little faith for feeling anxious. But the truth is that many heroes of faith also faced moments of deep anguish. What enabled them to prevail was precisely their pursuit of God and finding encouragement in those around them. That same path is available today. If you haven't found a welcoming environment yet, keep searching. There are different communities and groups, each with its own style and dynamics. Pray for God to guide you to a place where you can grow, receive, and also contribute. Remember that the Christian journey was not meant to be solitary. The one another phrases in the Bible are invitations for our lives to intertwine in mutual service and care. Even if it's hard to take the first step, try to reach out. Ask about meeting days and times, offer help, or request prayer. Over time, fellowship will naturally develop. Little by little, you'll feel that there's space to open your heart and be heard. And when anxiety tightens its grip, you'll have someone to turn to, reminding you that you don't have to face everything in silence. The recommendation to bear one another's burdens is not a religious formality. Rather, it's a principle that makes a real difference in life. Carrying the weight of problems, traumas, and uncertainties alone is too hard. But when we share, the pain becomes more bearable. Suddenly, anxiety recedes because you know there is human and divine support around you. Finally, fellowship helps you look beyond yourself. By engaging with the stories of others, you learn that everyone is fighting a different battle. This awakens compassion and solidarity, two virtues that lessen the intensity of fear and worry. When you are committed to loving your neighbor, anxiety has less space to dominate your thoughts. Therefore, if today you feel that anxiety has been strong and you see no way out, remember that you don't have to remain in solitude. There are communities, study groups, circles of friends, and faith brothers willing to walk alongside you. Give God a chance to use these human connections as a remedy against isolation, bringing relief and renewal to your soul. Healthy self-view. Have you ever noticed how the way you see yourself directly affects your anxiety? When self-esteem is low, any challenge can seem more daunting. You feel like you can't handle situations that, in reality, might be much smaller than your imagination insists on portraying. It's fascinating how the mind creates barriers when you feel undervalued or lacking purpose. However, there's a different perspective that invites you to understand the value within you. This invitation comes with a certainty. You were chosen and not rejected. This statement is not just a catchy phrase. It carries the power of a continuous reminder that your existence has purpose. When you allow yourself to believe in this truth, your attitude towards life changes. Imagine waking up on an ordinary day, but when you look in the mirror, you decide to see beyond your appearance. You observe your reflection, and instead of focusing on imperfections, you try to connect with something deeper. You think about your abilities, recall moments when you overcame fears, and realize that even in the face of failures, you've been striving to grow. It's strange how a simple shift in perspective can renew your energy, isn't it? When you start to develop a healthier view of yourself, you begin to appreciate details that once went unnoticed. What was once a weak point becomes a source of motivation for continuous improvement. Low self-esteem tends to fuel repetitive thoughts of inadequacy. These internal voices suggest that you aren't good enough, that you don't deserve anything valuable, or that you are destined to fail. Such thoughts drain the energy you have to face life. However, as you discover your worth, you come to understand that there is a reason for you to be here. Every aspect of yourself can be refined, and with that, you become more confident in tackling challenges because you find a foundation in something solid. You shift your focus from merely seeing what you perceive as flaws to recognizing the qualities being developed within you, such as courage, patience, and compassion. When you internalize the fact that you have been chosen, you realize that you aren't just a random occurrence. Feeling loved ignites strengths within you that often lie dormant. It's as if this emotion activates the certainty that it is worth pushing forward, even when difficulties arise. Whenever doubts attempt to overwhelm your mind, it's helpful to revisit what you know is being developed in your character. Maybe patience is a sensitive area for you, and you're in a learning phase in this regard. Or perhaps you notice that you have become a more compassionate person, developing empathy with each new human interaction. By listing the qualities you already recognize in yourself, it becomes easier to resist insecurity. Instead of succumbing to the idea that you lack value, you confront fear with real memories of overcoming challenges. You recall those times when you acted with courage, even though you were afraid of failing. You remember moments when you rode the wave of tension, took a deep breath, and chose to trust that the storm wouldn't last forever. Such memories are powerful as they show you that there is strength within your heart, even when everything seems to suggest otherwise. If anxiety has been manifesting through palpitations, insomnia, or even an overload of negative thoughts, seeing yourself differently opens the door to a new way of dealing with each symptom. After all, when you recognize your worth and understand that there is a greater purpose behind your journey, worries no longer define who you are. The state of alertness may arise, but it doesn't control your reactions as it did before. You remember that you are not alone, that you matter, and there is a reason for you to be here. Having a healthy self-image also involves recognizing your limits. It means knowing that you have virtues and strengths, but you are still human. You make mistakes, get tired, and need rest. Being chosen does not make you someone who never errs, but rather someone who finds the space to rise again when they stumble. This is a mark of growth, acknowledging mistakes and seeking correction without falling into the trap of believing that your identity is buried in every slip-up. It is essential to understand that failures are part of the journey, not the end of it. Anxiety diminishes when you stop seeing yourself as a problem without a solution. On the contrary, you realize that there is always a chance to start over. Each challenging moment can be an opportunity for growth. You do not need to remain trapped in the idea that you will always be insecure or that you lack the ability to achieve your dreams. A realistic view of yourself, grounded in the understanding that there is inherent value within you, brings ease to the journey. You recognize that even with fears, you can move forward, as something greater supports each step. When low self-esteem tries to whisper that you are unworthy of anything good, remind yourself of that phrase that says you have been chosen and not rejected. This changes everything. It means that there are valuable plans for your life that go beyond negative circumstances. It serves as a constant reminder that even when we make mistakes, we are still loved. This truth nurtures hope amid uncertainty. You stop viewing difficulties as proof of weakness and begin to see them as challenges that can be overcome with perseverance and faith. As you start to feel more confident, you create space to cultivate healthy relationships. People who understand your worth allow themselves to love and be loved more naturally, free from the constraints of the fear of rejection. This is a crucial point. When you are at peace with yourself, it is also easier to show empathy for others and build deeper connections. This influences all areas of life, as anxiety tends to decrease when you feel welcomed and useful in your everyday relationships. Think about how small gestures can reinforce your self-esteem. Write down the sincere compliments you receive, remember your daily accomplishments, or even celebrate the small steps that are leading you in the right direction. When you realize that every little progress matters, you gain the strength to keep growing. Anxiety does not magically disappear, but it loses some of the power it once had over you. Now, it no longer defines your essence, for you carry the certainty of being loved, chosen, and full of value. In this state, your heart finds more peace and courage to face any challenges that may arise. Praying with perseverance. Have you ever experienced those moments when you feel like you're talking to yourself, especially when it comes to praying? It's as if your words come out but find no destination. The feeling of emptiness, combined with the wait for a response, can be overwhelming. When the silence stretches on, you start to wonder if you're being heard. During such times, anxiety builds, as your mind insists that perhaps your prayer doesn't matter or that help won't arrive. However, there is an invitation for you not to give up. The story of the widow who insisted on being heard illustrates the importance of persevering in prayer, even when everything suggests that the answer won't come anytime soon. She knocked on the judge's door repeatedly without tiring. Perhaps anxiety consumed her, but her desire for justice was greater than her discouragement. So she kept going. In your moments of uncertainty, you can draw inspiration from her attitude. Even if you feel doubts, even if the wait seems endless, there is value in persistence. It's common to question why certain prayers seem unanswered. You may pray for healing, for a job opportunity, or for the reconciliation of a relationship, and still see things remain unchanged for weeks, months, or even years. It's at this point that the temptation arises to think that nothing will change. However, you are reminded that there is a right time for everything. The wait doesn't always mean denial. Sometimes it's merely preparation for something that is going to happen at the right moment. Praying with perseverance doesn't mean just repeating words mechanically as if they were a mantra. It's about keeping your heart open, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. It's the decision to continue seeking guidance, comfort, or provision, trusting that there is someone listening to every request. This willingness not to give up develops character. You become more patient, more empathetic, and more humble when you recognize that not everything is under your control. Anxiety can be faced when you establish a fixed prayer schedule. It's not about fulfilling a mechanical ritual, but rather about creating a sacred space in your routine where the hustle and bustle of everyday life pauses, and your heart connects with what you believe to be greater than any adversity. Setting aside a few minutes in the morning or before bed helps to establish a habit. Over time, this moment becomes a refuge where you find peace even in the storms. Recording your requests and tracking the responses can also bring clarity. When you write down what you asked for some time ago, you often realize that the answer came in a different way than you imagined. In other cases, it may take longer than you'd like, but recognizing this process broadens your perspective. You understand that you are not alone and that each prayer is not lost in the wind. There is a process being built even when circumstances don't show immediate results. Whatever your struggle may be, remember that persevering in prayer is not a sign of weakness or naivety. On the contrary, it reflects the courage to stand firm, even when you feel tired and worried. Anxiety may persist in trying to paralyze you, but the regular practice of talking to God, rather than feeding negative fantasies, becomes a place of rest for your mind. You acknowledge that you cannot solve everything on your own, and this lifts a tremendous weight off your shoulders. In addition to asking, prayer also involves gratitude and praise. When you remember to thank for the small daily achievements, you nurture the habit of viewing life with a lens of hope. Gratitude transforms your mindset, making you appreciate what you already have instead of sinking into worries about what has yet to happen. Thus, each prayer becomes an opportunity to strengthen the good within you and around you. In certain phases of life, it may seem like nothing happens the way you expected. You work hard, keep the faith, and continue praying, but you still can't see a way out of your problems. It's in these moments that perseverance needs to speak louder. Anxiety tries to convince you that it's pointless to go on, but genuine spirituality reminds you that there is a purpose in the waiting. You are being shaped, learning to trust, and confronting life from a broader perspective. Whenever discouragement threatens to take over, return to the source that inspires you to stand firm. Recall stories of people who received unexpected answers, and remember that waiting is not a punishment, but part of a process that involves inner transformation. Praying with perseverance is, at its core, refusing to give in to fear. It is believing that even in silence, God is working in a way that you may not yet understand. With this perspective, anxiety loses its grip as you anchor yourself in the hope that persistence will pay off, serving despite the storms. Have you noticed how, amidst problems, it's easy to close yourself off and forget the world around you? When anxiety tightens its grip, the natural reaction is to try to survive, focusing only on personal difficulties. But there is a different path, serving others, even when your heart feels heavy. It may seem contradictory, as it's common to think you need to resolve everything within yourself before helping anyone else. However, sometimes the act of putting yourself in service to others can alleviate your own tension. There is an inspiring example in a scene where Jesus, about to face great adversity, still found time and willingness to wash the disciples' feet. It's striking to think that even knowing what awaited him, he chose to serve. This shows that amidst the greatest storms, we can find meaning by looking beyond our own pains. When you do something for someone else, you discover a genuine satisfaction that arises from the act of caring and showing empathy. Anxiety often traps you in a whirlwind of thoughts about what could go wrong or everything that's lacking in your life. By directing some of your energy toward acts of love for others, you shift the focus away from yourself. For a moment, your mind breaks free from the spiral of worries and concentrates on doing something that benefits those around you. This shift in perspective brings relief, as it interrupts the mental replay of problems. It can be something simple, like sending a message of encouragement to someone who is feeling down, preparing a meal for someone in need of support, or offering a listening ear without judgment. You don't need to solve the other person's problem, but you can stand by their side, providing support. And by doing so, you realize that in a way you are also receiving something valuable, the opportunity to feel useful, alive, and connected. Serving amid the storms does not mean ignoring your feelings or pretending that your problems don't exist. On the contrary, it's recognizing that there are moments when helping others also brings healing to your own soul. You start to understand that even with your limitations, you have something to offer. And this awareness that there is something good flowing through you strengthens you, as it expands your sense of purpose in life. Anxiety often increases when you feel helpless. However, when you decide to take action on behalf of someone else, even in a simple way, that feeling of helplessness diminishes. You discover that you are capable of making a difference, even if it's just in the life of one person. Every act of care, every word of support, every gesture of kindness goes against the feeling of helplessness. This doesn't make your problems disappear, but it changes the way you face them. There are people who report finding purpose amidst their anxiety crises precisely by getting involved in social projects or engaging in small acts of kindness in their daily lives. This happens because these actions create a circle of well-being. When you give, you receive something back: satisfaction, a sense of belonging, and the assurance that you are not alone in the world. You realize that life is about exchanges, and that even in chaos, there are still opportunities to foster empathy and compassion. Sometimes, you might think that you don't have the time or resources to serve others, but it is possible to start where you are and with what you have. A simple phone call, a quick visit, or a message of hope can be enough to brighten someone's day. And when you least expect it, you realize that this gesture has also brought a little peace to your restless heart. You feel less suffocated because all of a sudden life seems bigger than your personal problems. When you plan an act of service, whether it's donating clothes you no longer wear or offering help to a non-profit organization, it's good to reflect afterward on how this impacted your anxiety. Perhaps you notice that during the time you were focused on blessing someone, your mind relaxed a bit. Serving doesn't eliminate the storms, but it gets you moving, preventing anxiety from paralyzing you completely. Thus, every positive action fuels the courage to keep going. Cultivating a constant service mindset helps you face storms with a different outlook. You know that even in times of suffering, you are still capable of reaching out to others. In return, you receive smiles, gratitude, and often unexpected support when you need it. The cycle of care and solidarity strengthens, creating networks of people who genuinely care for one another. In this environment, anxiety doesn't magically disappear, but it is alleviated by the strength that comes from unity and the exchange of affection. When thoughts race. Have you ever felt like your mind is spinning in 1,000 directions at once? It's that feeling of being overwhelmed by a flood of ideas and worries that just keep piling up. This often happens when anxiety is high. Every new thought triggers a danger alert, as if everything needs to be resolved immediately. This mental state is exhausting because the brain doesn't rest and the body remains in constant tension. To manage a racing mind, it's essential to learn to quiet yourself, even for a few minutes. Often, all it takes is to stop, take a deep breath, and remember that you don't have to solve everything at once. By inhaling and exhaling slowly, you signal to your body that it's time to calm down. Instead of fighting against your thoughts, just observe them without judgment. Little by little, your mind will find a more peaceful rhythm. Meditating on verses or phrases that promote peace can be a way to rediscover serenity. Choosing something that speaks to tranquility, protection, or trust helps to counterbalance the voices of fear that try to dominate your mind. When you focus on a word that inspires you to remain calm, your brain learns to shift its attention away from the catastrophic scenarios it was creating. This exercise may feel strange at first, but with practice, it becomes more and more natural. The repetition of negative thoughts is one of the most common triggers for anxiety attacks. When you feel your heart racing, your hands sweating, and your breath becoming shallow, your mind is often spinning around frightening scenarios, many of which may never actually happen. In those moments, taking a conscious pause to breathe or pray is like hitting the off button on an alarm siren that won't stop blaring. You take a step back and regain control over yourself. Dealing with racing thoughts doesn't mean blocking or denying what you're feeling. On the contrary, acknowledging the agitation is important. You recognize that you're anxious, but you choose not to let it take over. It's about training your mind to focus on the present moment instead of getting lost in worries about the future or painful memories from the past. Over time, you acquire tools that help you break free from the cycle of agitation. It may seem contradictory, but accepting anxiety as part of the moment also helps to weaken it. When you try to fight against it or get upset for feeling that way, it's common for the stress to increase. However, when you notice it, breathe, and remember that this feeling isn't permanent, it tends to gradually lessen. It's like watching a grey cloud drift across the sky. It will pass, even if it seems large in the moment. Putting daily breathing exercises into practice, dedicating a few minutes to deeply inhale and exhale, oxygenates the brain and reduces heart rate. This becomes even more effective when you combine the practice with serene reflection. It could be repeating a verse that speaks of peace, or simply remembering that you are safe in the here and now. The more you dedicate yourself to this daily care, the easier it becomes to calm the thoughts that insist on running wild. The environment you find yourself in also influences the speed of your mind. If you are surrounded by constant noise, excessive screens, and a frantic pace of tasks, your brain will hardly find rest. That's why seeking quiet or tranquil environments, even for short periods, makes a difference. It could be a silent room, a balcony, or any place where you can spend a few minutes without being interrupted. It can also help to have a notebook handy to write down what's on your mind. When thoughts are racing too fast, putting everything on paper alleviates the feeling of being overwhelmed. You can organize your ideas, prioritize tasks, and even realize that some worries were exaggerated. Furthermore, writing becomes a space for self-expression, allowing you to release what has been bothering you instead of keeping it all bottled up in your mind. Ultimately, anxiety doesn't have to dictate the pace of your life. By incorporating practices like breathing exercises, meditation, or relaxation, you remind yourself that it's possible to regain control, even when it feels like the current of thoughts wants to sweep you away. Each time you choose to quiet yourself amid internal chaos, you discover that there is strength and serenity within you. This way, racing thoughts begin to diminish, making room for a greater sense of balance and peace. Fasting and life purpose. Have you ever thought about why some people seek fasting as a spiritual practice? Often, it is seen merely as abstaining from food for a period of time, but this does not reflect the complete meaning. In the context of drawing closer to God, fasting serves as an intentional pause, not just from food, but from everything that steals our attention. It is a way of reminding ourselves that life is not limited to the day-to-day urgencies, and that there is a greater purpose in every step you take. During fasting, you may uncover areas that need adjustments. When you feel hunger, you realize more clearly how much you rely on something beyond yourself to move forward. This acknowledgement of weakness isn't bad. On the contrary, it brings humility. You see that you are not self-sufficient, and this opens the door for a deeper connection with what you believe. It's common to discover in this process that your motivations may be misaligned. Perhaps you started fasting thinking you would magically gain something, but along the journey, you realize that fasting is not a currency for instant results. It brings clarity to better see the paths you have been taking. The anxiety that arises during the period of deprivation exposes the insecurities that were previously latent. And when you confront this anxiety, you discover where you are placing your faith. Isaiah 58 shows us that fasting is not just about stopping eating, but also about caring for the people around you, being just, and cultivating a broken heart. This means that the purpose of fasting is to reconnect with the essence of love and compassion. When you abstain from something to focus on seeking spiritual direction, you realize that life doesn't just revolve around you. Your perspective expands to encompass the needs of those beside you. In the midst of fasting, you may feel anxiety heighten as you suddenly find yourself without what you were used to having. But this discomfort reveals points that you may not have noticed before. Perhaps you realize that you seek comfort in food, social media, or other distractions, rather than finding the support you need in God. It's not easy to face this reality, but it's liberating to understand that you don't have to be a hostage to things you thought were essential. In this practice, physical hunger opens the door to a greater hunger, the hunger to understand your purpose. You begin to question what your true mission is, what drives you, and how you can align your life with values that resonate with your heart. These questions can generate anxiety, but they also spur significant transformations. When you realize there is a greater meaning to your story, your anxiety about the future tends to decrease because you are no longer navigating aimlessly. It's interesting to note that for some people, total fasting may not be feasible due to health issues or daily routines. Nevertheless, it's still possible to engage in partial fasts or to give up other types of pleasures for a period. The key is the intention to create space to listen to what God wants to reveal. During this time, prayer and reading inspiring texts become bridges that strengthen the spiritual bond. You open yourself up to an inner silence that often reveals dormant voices. When you feel your stomach rumble or the urge to return to your usual distractions, it's time to reflect on why you are doing this. Anxiety wants to pull you away from discomfort, but fasting suggests that you confront the discomfort head-on in order to refine your essence. This confrontation with your own weaknesses strengthens you because you learn to cope with the absence of what once provided you with a momentary sense of security. At the end of the fasting period, many people report that their priorities have shifted. Perhaps the problem that once seemed gigantic still exists, but the way you face it has transformed. You feel more aware of what truly matters. Anxiety diminishes when you understand that, even in deprivation, there is sustenance and divine care. This is not a promise of ease, but a guarantee that you are not alone, even in the most challenging moments. Fasting, therefore, becomes part of a quest for purpose. You pause, abstain from something, feel the restlessness of hunger or the absence of that habit, and use that discomfort to look inward. In this process, you gain a better understanding of why you are here and how you can live in a way that aligns more closely with the faith you profess. It's a simple yet intense practice that reveals areas of your life that need attention. And by caring for them, you find a deeper meaning in your journey, reducing the anxiety that tries to distract you. Caring for the body, sleep and exercise. You've probably heard that taking care of your body is essential for a balanced life. But you might not give this idea much weight when anxiety kicks in. It's common for the mind to become so overwhelmed that you end up neglecting rest or setting aside physical activity. However, there is a direct link between the body and the mind. When the body is out of balance, the brain suffers too. And in a chaotic routine, anxiety finds fertile ground to manifest. Sleep is one of the fundamental pillars of a healthy body. If you don't sleep well, your concentration declines, your mood fluctuates, and worries become more intense. Have you noticed how, after a bad night's sleep, any problem seems bigger than it really is? This happens because the brain hasn't had time to process the day's information, organize memories, and rejuvenate to handle new stresses. Therefore, establishing a consistent sleep routine can be a significant step toward reducing stress and anxiety. You might think that you can't maintain a regular sleep schedule because of daily obligations. Still, it's possible to make small adjustments that help create a more conducive environment for rest. Turning off electronics or dimming bright lights sometime before bed, avoiding stimulants in the late afternoon, and trying to relax with reading or soothing music are some actions that can help. When you prioritize sleep, you realize how everything becomes more manageable. Another ally against anxiety is regular exercise. This isn't about chasing an aesthetic standard, but rather moving your body to release tension and produce substances that promote well-being. It could be a walk outdoors, a bike ride, a dance class, or any activity that makes sense to you. The important thing is to get moving and recognize that your body was made for it. Physical exercise regulates hormones and helps the mind enter a state of balance. Even if you feel unmotivated at first, it's worth insisting. Soon, your body will become accustomed to movement, and as a result, anxiety attacks may become less frequent or less intense. Engaging in physical activity also boosts self-confidence. When you overcome laziness and commit to taking care of yourself, you gain a sense of achievement that reflects in how you face other challenges. Caring for your body is ultimately an act of respect for your own life. If you believe that you were bought at a valuable price and that there is a purpose in your existence, it makes sense to cherish the gift that is your body. This care doesn't eliminate problems, but it provides you with better conditions to face them. You'll feel more energized, more alert, and with your hormones in balance, reducing the tendency toward anxiety attacks. It's important to remember that each body is unique. Discovering which physical activities and sleep routines work best for you is a personal process. Some people adapt well to morning workouts, while others prefer the end of the day. The key is not to give up after the first frustrating attempt. If one type of exercise doesn't appeal to you, try another. The goal is to find a pleasurable way to move your body without seeing it as an unbearable burden or obligation. If possible, combine physical activity with something that brings you joy. Walking in a beautiful park, listening to upbeat music while you work out, or even inviting someone to be your workout partner can enhance the experience. When the experience becomes enjoyable, the likelihood of persistence increases. Persistence is crucial for reaping long-term benefits. Over time, this routine becomes part of your life, and you may wonder why you didn't start earlier. The same applies to sleep. Creating a calm environment with a pleasant temperature and minimal distractions helps induce deep rest. You can establish small relaxation rituals, taking a warm bath, reading a few pages of a book, praying, or meditating. All of these signal to your brain that it's time to wind down. This process doesn't happen overnight, but consistency leads to more restorative nights. By maintaining a routine of self-care in sleep and exercise, you send a clear message to yourself. I value my health, and I'm willing to take care of it. This attitude boosts your self-esteem, as it shows that you consider yourself worthy of attention and care. It's an important step in overcoming anxiety, which is often fueled by feelings of inadequacy or self-neglect. When you respect your body and understand that it is an essential part of your well-being, you find a solid pillar for balancing your mind. Facing financial challenges. Without anxiety, have you ever found yourself facing bills that don't add up, debts that show up without warning, or the insecurity of not knowing if your paycheck will cover this month's expenses? Financial issues are one of the biggest sources of anxiety, as they affect not just your wallet, but also your sense of security and stability. However, there is an invitation to face this scenario differently, without panicking or losing hope. If you take a moment to reflect, you'll realize that many of your fears are tied to the idea that you have to solve everything on your own. This leads to despair as insecurity takes over, but there's a reminder that life doesn't have to be lived in isolation. Trusting in something greater than yourself, believing in divine provision, can bring the calm needed to think clearly. This trust is not escapism, but the certainty that, even in tough times, there is direction and care. When you feel anxious about finances, it's common for your thoughts to race and create scenarios of total resource scarcity. You imagine not only next month's bills, but also those for the entire year, anticipating difficult situations that may never happen. In that moment, it helps to take a deep breath and remember that life happens day by day. You can plan for the future, but you don't need to drown in fear of scenarios that haven't even arrived yet. Setting up a financial plan, even if it's a simple one, helps reduce anxiety. You separate what is essential from what can be cut. You look at your debts honestly, confront reality, and think of strategies to overcome them. You may need to forego luxuries or reevaluate priorities, but in the end, this reorganization brings relief. You know you are acting responsibly and that you aren't running away from the problem. Often, financial anxiety grows due to a lack of communication. You might feel ashamed to talk about your struggles because you fear judgment or feel guilty. However, sharing with a trusted person can help you see solutions you hadn't noticed before. Talking with family, friends, or even seeking professional advice can be an essential step toward finding a way out. When you open your heart, you realize that you are not the only one facing money problems. It's also important to maintain hope that new doors can open. This doesn't mean just sitting around waiting for a miracle to fall from the sky. It's about combining faith with action. While you pray and seek divine provision, you also send out resumes, make connections, learn new skills, or invest in a small business that fits your reality. Anxiety decreases when you feel that you are taking steps to change the situation instead of just worrying. Sometimes changes might not come as quickly as you would like. You may still find it hard to make ends meet, even when you're doing everything right. In these moments, anxiety can come back with full force, whispering that there is no way out. However, it's crucial to keep perspective. Remember the times when you received help in unexpected ways, and how opportunities arose in the past. This nourishes the courage to keep believing that better days can come. Comparing yourself to others can also trigger financial anxiety. You see someone who seemingly has everything in abundance and wonder why it's so difficult for you. However, each story is unique. What looks easy for someone else may involve sacrifices or situations you're unaware of. Learning to be grateful for what you already have helps to curb the impulse to measure yourself against others' standards. You refocus on your journey and make the best of what you possess. To face financial challenges without drowning in worry, it's important to balance realism and faith. Realism helps you organize your finances, cut expenses, and seek ways to increase your income. Faith, in turn, reminds you that you are not helpless and that there is hope beyond the numbers. When these two aspects go hand in hand, you live with more serenity, knowing that you are doing your part and trusting that there will be light even when everything seems cloudy. In the end, financial anxiety can become an opportunity for growth. You learn to value what you have more, develop empathy for those in greater need, and strengthen your discipline. You realize that even with limited resources, you can still help someone in a more delicate situation. This attitude of care and solidarity reflects back on you in surprising ways, nurturing a sense of community and love that ultimately also calms the mind and heart. Faith and therapy, a partnership that frees. Have you ever wondered why so many emotions mix together when you go through times of tension or worry? Anxiety often manifests as a tightness in the chest, a pit in the stomach, or a restlessness that won't let up. Amidst these feelings, faith can serve as a pillar, offering guidance and hope, while therapy provides tools and professional support. This combination is not contradictory. On the contrary, it can create a safe space where you can express your pain and find pathways to confront it. The union of spiritual beliefs and psychological resources does not deny the inner strength you possess, but broadens your understanding of what is happening in your mind and heart. When you decide to seek therapeutic help, it doesn't mean your faith is lacking. Many religious traditions encourage seeking advice and treatments that promote well-being. In the biblical context, there are passages that speak to the importance of sharing concerns with wise individuals. This can include qualified professionals who are prepared to listen without judgment and offer techniques that assist in understanding and managing emotional challenges. Thus, when you sit down with a psychologist or therapist, you find a neutral ground to express your anxieties without the fear of being misunderstood or condemned. In this space, prayers and spiritual reflections can serve as support and inspiration, walking hand in hand with practical self-care exercises. Some people hesitate to seek external help out of fear of appearing weak or lacking faith. However, recognizing that you need a professional perspective is a sign of courage and maturity. When you bring your problems into therapy, you are taking a crucial step toward breaking free from patterns that trap your mind. Often, distorted beliefs about yourself or the world can amplify anxiety. Faith, in this context, can provide peace and confidence, but the guidance of a therapist helps to uncover deep-seated origins and formulate effective strategies for overcoming challenges. This process of self-discovery, combined with spiritual practice, creates a solid foundation for you to face each challenge with greater strength. Perhaps you have heard stories of people who found in Christian therapy or support groups a way to align religious principles with scientific techniques for emotional care. This approach does not diminish the value of prayer or studying the scriptures, but emphasizes that human action, guided by God, is also part of the healing process. When you share your struggles with someone prepared to listen, you create space to see details that were previously hidden. Achieving serenity does not mean ignoring problems, but understanding and addressing them in a healthy way. In this context, the trust placed in divine promises of comfort combines with psychological knowledge, enhancing your ability to develop practical strategies for each obstacle. In many situations, you might feel torn between fully trusting in divine providence and simultaneously seeking earthly solutions. This tension does not have to be a source of guilt or conflict. Remember that the wisdom mentioned in biblical passages encourages surrounding yourself with sound advice. This includes doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and other professionals who dedicate their lives to studying and caring for mental well-being. No pain is too small to be taken seriously. If you notice persistent distress, constant nightmares, or panic attacks, it is worth considering talking to someone qualified. Faith, in this process will continue to play a fundamental role, as it sustains your spirit while treatment strengthens your mind. Seeking therapy does not mean giving up on prayer, worship, or any form of devotion. You remain free to connect with the sacred, nurturing your soul with readings and moments of communion. In the meantime, the therapist acts as a guide who helps to reshape destructive beliefs, process traumas, and develop coping skills. If anxiety has roots in old insecurities, the empathetic listening of a professional can help transform past pains into valuable lessons. And when these discoveries are intertwined with trust in divine care, you realize that nothing has been lost. On the contrary, every fragment of your story becomes part of a greater process of growth and overcoming. Imagine that you are afraid to show your vulnerability in front of friends or family. They may not fully understand what you are going through or think that everything can be resolved simply with more prayer. In this moment, having a professional who respects your faith and offers appropriate techniques makes all the difference. Instead of viewing anxiety as a punishment or a weakness, you begin to see it as a sign that something within you needs specific care. This shift in perspective reduces guilt and pressure, allowing spirituality to be an ally on your journey, not a source of demands. Thus, every therapy session becomes part of a pact of self-love, enriched by trust in a higher power. If you've been putting off the decision to seek help, it might be time to reflect on what is truly holding you back. Is it fear of judgment, lack of financial resources, or the belief that you need to handle everything on your own? None of these reasons diminish the legitimacy of the pain you're experiencing. Every story is unique, and what works for one person may not be ideal for another. That's why it's important to talk to religious leaders, trusted friends, or even research institutions that offer low-cost psychological support. Your mental health is a valuable investment, and faith grows stronger when it finds a healthy internal environment to thrive. If you feel insecure about opening up, remember that therapists adhere to ethical codes and confidentiality. In many cases, there are professionals who blend scientific techniques with Christian values, embracing your beliefs without judgment. This way, faith remains a source of comfort, and therapy provides strategies for overcoming challenges, reminding you that there is always solid hope.